My sister poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into turning our family manor into her personal wedding content stage, completely forgetting that tree law has sharper teeth than any bride. She never imagined that a single marriage certificate and a few quiet signatures could inverse her big day, transforming it into a private show for tree inspectors. And when the music finally died, it was not a glitch, but a calculated execution to save the one thing she called trash. I am Cassidy Williamson, and right now, I am invisible. I sit at a small, circular table pushed aggressively close to the drafty bay window of the Silvercrest Manor Grand Hall, half hidden by a swath of heavy velvet drapery that smells of dust and lemon polish. The air inside the room is thick enough to choke on, a suffocating cocktail of expensive floral arrangements, the metallic tang of chilled oysters, and the overwhelming scent of ambition. Above us, the crystal chandelier, a monstrosity of glass and gold that my great-grandfather commissioned in the 1920s, vibrates slightly with the bass of the background jazz. It casts fractured, nervous light over the room, catching the rim of champagne flutes and the overly whitened teeth of the guests. I look down at my hand resting on the tablecloth. I am twisting my wedding band. It is a simple thing. A thin gold band with a tiny, flush-set diamond that Owen and I picked out at a pawn shop in Boston 3 years ago. When my sister Chloe first saw it, she laughed, a high, tinkling sound like breaking glass, and asked if it came out of a vending machine. She told me it was cute in a poverty-chic sort of way. I twist it now, feeling the cold metal bite into my skin. It grounds me. It is real, unlike everything else happening in this room. Okay, everyone. If I could get your attention, phones up, please. We are going live in 3, 2, 1. The voice cuts through the ambient chatter like a serrated knife. Chloe Williamson stands at the head table, tapping a spoon against her crystal flute. She is glowing, quite literally, thanks to a portable ring light her assistant is holding just out of frame. My sister looks like a princess from a fairy tale written by marketing executives. Her dress is a shimmering column of silk that costs more than my first car, and her hair is sculpted into waves so perfect they look incapable of moving in the wind. She is not looking at the guests. She is looking at the phone propped up on a tripod in the center of the table. Hey guys, welcome to the official rehearsal dinner live stream, Chloe beams, waving with both hands, the diamond on her finger flashing aggressively. It is huge, heavy, and presumably paid for by the same line of credit that is funding the open bar. We are here at my family estate, Silvercrest Manor, in beautiful Maplebridge, New Hampshire. As you can see, the vibes are immaculate. A ripple of applause moves through the room. The guests are a curated mix of our parents' country club friends and Chloe's entourage of fellow content creators, people who speak in hashtags and dress in sponsored clothing. My parents, Martin and Diane, are seated to Chloe's right. They are beaming. My mother is dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed napkin, and my father is puffing out his chest, looking like a man who believes he has conquered the world rather than a man who is rapidly draining his retirement accounts to buy his daughter likes on the internet. I take a sip of water. It is warm. Chloe continues, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that amplifies perfectly over the microphone system. I have a huge announcement. You guys know how much I love this house. It is my legacy. But let's be real. It is a little dusty, a little stuck in the past. There is a polite titter of laughter. And you guys know I want Silvercrest to be the premier wedding venue in New England after I take over, she says, winking at the camera. But there is one big problem, one big, ugly, shady problem. She turns and points a manicured finger toward the French doors behind her, the ones that lead out to the stone terrace and the lawn beyond. Through the glass, illuminated by the floodlights, stands the Sentinel. It is a white oak, over 100 years old. It is massive, a titan of nature with a trunk so wide it would take 4 men to link hands around it. Its branches spread out like the nervous system of the earth itself, thick and gnarled, holding up a canopy that has sheltered 3 generations of Williamsons. It is majestic. It is the lungs of this property. That tree, Chloe says, wrinkling her nose as if she smells something rotting. It is huge, it is messy, and honestly, it is right where the main stage needs to go. The room goes quiet for a second, then a few people chuckle, thinking she is joking. I am serious, Chloe laughs, throwing her head back. After the wedding this weekend, as my first act as the new manager of the estate, we are doing a little landscaping. We are going to knock that old thing down, rip out those roots that are ruining the lawn, and pour a sleek, concrete pad for a permanent DJ booth and light show setup. We are talking festival-grade sound, lasers, the works. We are going to turn Silvercrest into a super venue. The room explodes into applause. My parents are clapping the hardest. That is my girl, my father shouts, raising his glass. Invest in the future. Out with the old. My stomach turns over. A cold, hard knot forms in my chest. I look at the sentinel through the glass. I remember being 7 years old, sitting in the cradle of its lowest branch, legs dangling. My grandmother, Eleanor, sat on the bench beneath me, reading poetry aloud. The air smelled of rain and wet bark. That tree was our sanctuary. It was the only place on the estate where the air did not feel thin with pretension. Grandma Eleanor used to touch the trunk with her palm and tell me that the house was just wood and stone, but the tree was the memory keeper. If this tree goes, Cassidy, the soul of this place goes with it, she had said. Now, my sister wants to turn it into a parking spot for a DJ booth so she can play electronic dance music at ear-splitting volumes. I shift my gaze to the back of the room, leaning against a pillar, hidden in the shadows where the light does not reach, is Owen. My husband does not fit in this room. He is wearing a suit that fits him well but is clearly not tailored in Italy. He has a beard that he trims himself and eyes that see more than anyone else here. Owen is an environmental lawyer. He specializes in conservation easements and, more specifically, tree law. He is not clapping. He is staring at Chloe with a look of clinical fascination, the way a scientist looks at a bacteria culture that is rapidly multiplying in a petri dish. He catches my eye across the room. He gives a microscopic nod. He is doing the math in his head. I know exactly what he's thinking. He is calculating the diameter of the trunk, the species, the location within the riparian buffer zone of the lake, and the statutory damages for willful destruction of a heritage tree. He is watching my sister tie a noose around her own financial neck and smile while she does it. I look down at my lap. Resting on my navy blue dress trousers is my leather clutch. It feels heavy, heavier than it should. Inside, there is no lipstick, no compact mirror. Inside is a sealed manila envelope, a USB drive, and a folded stack of printouts detailing invoices that span the last 6 months. I have been the boring sister for 31 years, the one who liked math, the one who became a forensic accountant, the one who wore flats and tied her hair back and fixed the spreadsheets while Chloe practiced her poses. They think I am here to fill a seat. They think I am the background character in Chloe's protagonist arc. The crew is coming next week, Chloe shouts into the microphone, caught up in the adoration of the crowd. By the time I get back from the honeymoon, that shade will be gone, and we will have nothing but sun and sound. The music is going to drown out the wind in those old dead leaves forever. Imagine the parties, someone shouts from the back. It is going to be iconic, Chloe screams. That is it. That is the sentence. I do not make a scene. I do not throw a drink. I simply stand up. The legs of my heavy wooden chair drag against the polished floor with a sound like a shriek. Scree. It is a harsh, discordant noise that cuts right through the applause. The sound creates a vacuum. Heads turn. The clapping falters and dies out. Chloe stops mid-laugh, her smile faltering as she looks over the heads of her admirers to find the source of the noise. She sees me, standing by the window, clutch in hand. My face is calm. I am told I have a resting face that looks like I am auditing someone's taxes in my head. Right now, that is exactly what I'm doing. Cassidy? Chloe says into the microphone, her voice taking on that condescending, pitying tone she reserves for me. "Do you have something to say? Or are you just heading to the buffet early?" A few people snicker. My mother shoots me a look that screams, "Sit down and stop embarrassing us." I do not speak. I do not need to. I just look at her, then look at the tree, then look back at her. I start walking toward the exit, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the hardwood. I pass Owen on my way out. Owen pushes off the pillar. He steps into the light, just enough so everyone can see him. He is not smiling. He looks at Chloe, then at my parents, and finally rests his gaze on the camera that is still live streaming to thousands of strangers. His voice is not loud, but it carries to every corner of the silent room.
"No, Chloe," Owen says, and his voice is as dry as dead leaves. "The music will die first, thanks to tree law. To understand why my sister's declaration was an act of financial suicide, you first have to understand the asset itself. Silvercrest Manor is not just a home, it is a machine."
Built in the roaring 1920s, the manor is a colonial revival beast that sits on the highest ridge of Maplebridge, New Hampshire. It boasts 11 bedrooms, a ballroom that echoes even when filled with people, and a facade defined by 4 massive white columns that look like the teeth of a giant smiling down at the rest of the town. The roof is dark slate, heavy and expensive to maintain, sloping down toward a wraparound porch that offers an uninterrupted view of Lake Silvercrest. The water down there is deep and cold, reflecting the house like a mirror that only shows the truth. But the real heart of the property isn't the house, it is the Sentinel. The Sentinel is a white oak that predates the foundation of the manor by at least a century. It is an architectural marvel of nature. Its trunk is a rugged, scarred cylinder of history, and its canopy is wide enough to shelter a wedding party of 200 people from a sudden summer storm. Its roots are thick, knobby veins that run deep into the soil and right up to the edge of the lake, holding the bank together against erosion. The town of Maplebridge takes this tree seriously. It is listed on the Heritage Tree Registry. If you look at the official town seal stamped on the side of every police cruiser and garbage truck in the county, you will see a stylized drawing of our house, and right next to it, larger than life, is that oak tree. My sister sees the tree as a landscaping obstacle. I see it as a line item on a balance sheet that protects the structural integrity of our most profitable view. Silvercrest is not a passive inheritance. For the last decade, under my grandmother's guidance and my back-end management, it has operated as a high-end venue for boutique weddings and corporate retreats. We are not talking about a bed and breakfast where you rent a room for $100. We are talking about exclusive buyouts. We charge premium rates for privacy and history. I know the numbers because I am the one who built the spreadsheets. I tracked the seasonal fluctuations, the catering margins, and the maintenance costs, after paying the gardeners, the cleaners, the property taxes, and the insurance premiums. Silvercrest clears a net profit of $450,000 a year. That is nearly $500,000 of passive income, provided you do not act like an idiot and destroy the very aesthetic that clients pay for. That is who I am. I am Cassidy Williamson, the boring daughter. I am a forensic accountant at Lantern Ridge Analytics. I spend my days hunting for hidden assets in divorce cases and tracing embezzled funds for mid-sized corporations. My life is defined by black and white rows of data. I wear flat shoes because they are practical. I tie my hair back because I do not have time to move it out of my face. I find comfort in the fact that numbers, unlike people, never lie to you. If the numbers do not add up, it means someone is hiding something. Then there is Chloe. Chloe is the golden child, the one who sparkles. She has over 200,000 followers on social media, a number she drops into casual conversation within 5 minutes of meeting anyone. She calls herself the Queen of Aesthetic. She has never held a job that required a W-2 form. She lives off a combination of brand sponsorships for teeth whitening kits and a generous allowance my grandmother left for what she termed self-development. Chloe interpreted self-development as trips to Tulum and a wardrobe consisting entirely of beige linen. To Chloe, Silvercrest is a backdrop. It is content. It is a prop for her narrative. But to me, and to my grandmother Eleanor, it was a living, breathing responsibility. My relationship with Grandma Eleanor was not built on shopping trips or salon days. It was built in the shade of the Sentinel. When I was a teenager, while Chloe was inside practicing dance routines, I would sit on the grass with Eleanor. We would drink iced tea that was too strong and not sweet enough, and she would tell me the history of the dirt we were sitting on. She told me about the year the market crashed and how her father almost sold the South Lawn, but refused because he could not bear to lose the access to the water. She told me about the storms of 1954 that took down the elms but spared the oak. She taught me that owning land is not about possession, it is about stewardship. I remember one afternoon specifically. The air was thick with the humidity of late July. I was studying for a calculus exam, my book spread out over the roots of the tree. Eleanor was watching the sunlight filter through the leaves, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on her lap. She reached out and tapped the cover of my textbook. "Cassidy," she had said, her voice raspy but sharp, "this house is a beast. It eats money. If you do not respect it, it will swallow you whole." I had looked up, squinting against the glare. "This house should never belong to someone who sees it as a photo opportunity," she continued, her eyes drifting toward the house where Chloe was currently taking selfies in the window. "It needs a person who sees it as a business and a responsibility. You have to love the mortar, not just the party." That stuck with me, while I spent my 20s optimizing the booking calendar to ensure we had 80% occupancy during the off-season and negotiating contracts with vendors to stop them from overcharging us for linens. Chloe was busy building her brand. She would swoop in for a weekend, dressed in a pristine white sundress that looked ridiculous for actual country living. She would carry a ceramic mug of latte out to the porch, a mug she often did not even drink from, and set up her tripod. She would film a 15-second clip of herself gazing wistfully at the horizon, captioning it with something about healing in the countryside or reconnecting with her roots. Then she would pack up, complain about the slow Wi-Fi, and drive back to the city, leaving me to deal with the septic tank inspection. We exist in two different realities. For me, Silvercrest is a $450,000 a year annuity that requires precise management and legal protection. It is the physical embodiment of my grandmother's grit. It is the place where I learned that stability comes from deep roots and careful planning. For Chloe, Silvercrest is simply the next rung on her ladder. She has maxed out her growth as a lifestyle influencer. She is getting older. The algorithm is changing. She needs a pivot. She has decided that her next persona is going to be the real estate queen, the heiress who renovates historic properties and throws lavish parties. She does not see a business. She sees a stage. And she does not realize that by destroying the stage to make room for the spotlight, she is going to bring the entire theater crashing down on her head. The conflict between us was never just about sibling rivalry. It is a fundamental war between substance and surface, between the person who waters the roots and the person who picks the flowers. And as I sat in that rehearsal dinner, listening to her plan to pave over a century of history for a dance floor that would be fashionable for exactly 6 months, I realized that two worldviews can no longer coexist in this house. One of us is going to win, and since I am the one who knows where the money comes from, and more importantly, where the bodies are buried in the paperwork, I decided right then that it was not going to be the girl with the ring light. The decline did not happen all at once. It started with a winter that was too long and too cold, the kind of New England freeze that seeps into the mortar of old houses and the bones of old women. My grandmother, Eleanor, had survived 90 winters before this one, but this particular season, with its relentless ice storms and gray skies, seemed to take something from her that she could not get back. By the time the snow melted, she was no longer the formidable matriarch who walked the perimeter of Silvercrest every morning. She was frail, her breath catching in her chest like a rusted hinge. When the pneumonia diagnosis came, I did not hesitate. I went into the office at Lantern Ridge Analytics and told my partners I needed an indefinite leave of absence. I handed off 2 forensic audits involving high-profile divorce settlements, packed a bag, and drove north. I moved into the Maple Bridge Community Hospital, trading my quiet apartment for a plastic reclining chair that smelled of bleach and industrial cleaner. For 3 weeks, my world shrank to the size of room 304. My routine was mechanical, a survival tactic I had learned from years of balancing ledgers. By day, I sat in the hard chair next to her bed, my laptop balanced on my knees, running numbers for the estate, paying the heating bills, and answering vendor emails so the business of Silvercrest did not collapse just because its heart was failing. By night, when the hospital grew quiet, and the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the monitors, I put the screens away. I would hold her hand, her skin was so thin it felt like parchment paper, and read to her. We went through the classics she loved, but mostly, I just talked to her. I told her about the lake, about the birds returning to the feeder, about the things that still lived outside these sterile walls. I was exhausted. My eyes burned constantly. I drank coffee that tasted like battery acid just to keep my brain functioning. And where was Chloe? Chloe was in Palm Springs. She was filming a new series for her channel called Reset My Life. Apparently, the desert sun was essential for her spiritual alignment. When I called her to tell her that Grandma was being moved to palliative care, she didn't ask about oxygen levels or pain management. She sighed, a long, dramatic sound that crackled over the speakerphone. "I really cannot come right now. Cassidy," she said, her voice tight with self-preservation. "You know how sensitive I am to environments. Hospitals have such low vibrational energy. It would literally ruin my mood for the whole shoot. And I have obligations to sponsors." She promised to FaceTime. She did, exactly twice, both times. She kept the camera angled high to show off her tan, spoke for 3 minutes about how hard her yoga retreat was, and then said she had to run because the lighting was perfect for a golden hour selfie. She never saw the way Grandma's eyes drifted toward the phone, searching for a connection that wasn't there. I did not have the energy to be angry. I just took the phone away and told Grandma that Chloe was busy working. It was the kind lie we tell to protect the people we love from the sharpness of reality. One night, about a week before the end, there was a moment of clarity. The fever that had been clouding Eleanor's mind lifted. Just for an hour. It was 2 a.m. The hospital was silent. I was dozing in the chair when I felt a weak squeeze on my fingers. I sat up, blinking the sleep from my eyes. Eleanor was looking at me, her blue eyes clear and sharp, stripping away the fog of medication. "Cassidy," she whispered, "the leather notebook, in my bedside drawer at home. You need to get it." I leaned in closer. "The notebook?" "It has the drafts," she said, her voice barely a thread. "The new trust, the rules." I frowned. I knew there was a trust, but I assumed it was standard boilerplate legal work. "It is a test," she said, and a small, mischievous smile touched her lips, a ghost of the woman she used to be. "I am not leaving Silvercrest to your father. He is a good man, but he buys boats he does not sail. And your mother, she thinks money is something that grows back like grass." She took a shallow breath, her chest rising and falling with effort. "The house goes to the generation that can keep it," she said. "I set up a game, Cassidy, a test of character. It is not about who I love more, it is about who can carry the weight. It is not for the one who looks best in a wedding dress. It is for the one who reads the fine print." My heart hammered against my ribs. She was entrusting me with a secret, a strategy. She was telling me that she had seen everything, my spreadsheets, my quiet dedication, and Chloe's vanity. And she had designed a legal framework to address it. "You have to be smart," she rasped. "Do not let them sell it. Do not let them turn it into an ATM machine." The moment passed. Her eyes drifted shut, and the grip on my hand loosened. I sat there in the dark, the weight of her words settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat. It was a validation I had waited 30 years to hear. She saw me. The next afternoon, the anger finally arrived. I had stepped out into the hallway to stretch my legs. My back was screaming from the torture of the hospital chair. I walked toward the vending machines at the end of the corridor, needing water. As I turned the corner, I heard my mother's voice. She was sitting in the waiting area, phone pressed to her ear, her back to me. "Oh, honey, don't cry." My mother was cooing. "I know it is unfair. They do not deserve you." I froze. I knew that tone. It was the tone she used when Chloe broke a nail or didn't get invited to a party. I stood behind a pillar, unseen. "Chloe, listen to me," my mother said, her voice dropping lower. "Who cares if that skincare brand dropped the contract? You are bigger than them, and besides, you do not need to worry about money." I held my breath. "Grandma is, well, it won't be long now," my mother said, shifting comfortably in her chair. "And once she passes, Silvercrest is going to be ours. Dad and I have already talked about it. We are going to make sure you are taken care of. You will have the estate. You can live there, run your little videos, do whatever you want. You will never have to worry about a paycheck again. It is your safety net, baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. While I was wiping Eleanor's face with a cool cloth, while I was managing the property taxes so the state didn't put a lien on the house, while I was sleeping in a chair that was destroying my spine, my mother was selling my grandmother's legacy to comfort Chloe over a lost Instagram sponsorship. They viewed Silvercrest as a consolation prize, a piggy bank to smash open because Chloe was too fragile to survive in the real world without a cushion. They were vultures, circling before the heart had even stopped beating. I backed away silently, my hands shaking. I did not confront her. I did not scream. I went back to room 304 and sat down. I looked at my grandmother's sleeping face, at the lines etched by 90 years of resilience. If this was a game, as she had said, then I was done playing the passive observer. I was done being the boring sister who cleaned up the mess. If there was a test, I was going to ace it, and I was going to make sure that the safety net my mother promised turned into a trap. Eleanor lingered for 3 more days. I did not leave her side. Chloe never came. On the final night, the breathing changed. It became the Cheney-Stokes rhythm, the distinct pattern that signals the end. I was the only one there. My parents had gone home to get a good night's sleep because the hospital depressed them. I leaned close to her ear. I told her it was okay to go. I told her I had the notebook. I told her I understood the assignment. She opened her eyes one last time. They were milky, unfocused, looking at something beyond the ceiling tiles. Her lips moved. I had to press my ear almost against her mouth to hear it. "The Sentinel," she breathed. "I am listening. Grandma." "Don't let them." She struggled, fighting for the last scrap of air. "Don't let them turn those roots into a walkway for high heels." She closed her eyes. 5 minutes later, the monitor flatlined. The room was silent, save for the mechanical hum of the equipment that was no longer needed. I stood up and kissed her forehead. Then I picked up my phone. I did not call my parents immediately. I did not call Chloe. Instead, I opened my banking app and checked the balance of my savings. Then I opened the calendar and looked at the date. I was calculating the probate timeline. I was planning. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot lights. I was not just a grieving granddaughter anymore. I was the executor of a plan that was about to blindside everyone who had underestimated us. "I am sorry, Chloe," I whispered to the empty room, "but the party is over." The library at Silvercrest Manor has always felt less like a room for reading and more like a chamber for judgment. The walls are paneled in dark, suffocating walnut that seems to absorb the light, and the air smells permanently of beeswax and old leather. Above the fireplace, a portrait of my great-grandfather stares down with eyes that look suspiciously like they are counting the change in your pocket. We were gathered around the long mahogany table, my parents, Chloe, and I. The mood was a grotesque cocktail of somber bereavement and electric greed. My mother, Diane, was wearing black, but it was a fashionable black, a silk dress that she had bought specifically for the funeral and, presumably, for this exact moment. My father, Martin, was trying to look like the patriarch, drumming his fingers on the table, but I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. They were not mourning a mother. They were waiting for a wire transfer. At the head of the table sat Arthur Calder, Mr. Calder has been the family attorney for 30 years. He is a man who smiles only when he catches a tax error in his favor. He is dry, gray, and possesses the kind of patience usually reserved for kindergarten teachers or prison wardens. He placed a thick leather binder on the table. The sound of it hitting the wood was heavy. Final. "Thank you all for coming," Calder said. His voice was a flat baritone. "As you know, Eleanor was a woman of precise intent. She spent the last year of her life restructuring her estate. There is no will in the traditional sense." My father stopped drumming his fingers. "What do you mean? No will?" "Everything," Calder continued, ignoring the interruption. "The manor, the grounds, the investment portfolio, and the operating LLC that manages the events business has been placed into the Eleanor Williamson Revocable Living Trust." My mother let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "Well, that is just a technicality, right? To avoid probate taxes? Smart woman. So, who are the trustees? Martin and I?" Calder looked at my parents over the rim of his reading glasses. It was a look of profound pity. "No," he said, "you are not." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. "Eleanor was very specific in her reasoning," Calder said, flipping a page. "She felt that while she loved her son and daughter-in-law deeply, you have, and I quote, proved to be historically catastrophic at retaining liquid assets." My father's face turned a shade of plum usually found in bruised fruit. "She did not say that." "She did," Calder replied. "She also noted that if she gave you the manor, you would mortgage it within 6 months to fund a venture capital scheme, and if she gave it to Diane, the antique furniture would be replaced by beige sectionals within the week." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my face neutral. I could feel a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in my chest. Grandma had roasted them from the grave. "So," Chloe piped up, looking bored. She was scrolling on her phone under the table. "If they don't get it, who does? Me? Do I get the house?" Calder turned his gaze to my sister. "The trust stipulates that the control of Silvercrest Manor, along with the income stream of approximately $450,000 per year, passes to the next generation. However, it is not a direct gift. It is a conditional grant." He paused for effect. "The title of managing trustee, along with full executive power over the estate and its revenue, will be granted to the first granddaughter who fulfills 2 specific conditions." I sat up straighter. The air in the room seemed to sharpen. This was it, the game. "Condition 1, Calder read. "The beneficiary must present a valid, state-recognized marriage certificate. Eleanor believed that the stewardship of this estate requires a level of maturity and partnership that she felt neither of you had yet demonstrated." "Marriage?" Chloe scoffed. "That is so old-fashioned. What is this, the 1800s? "Condition 2, Calder continued, his voice overriding hers. "The beneficiary must submit a comprehensive 5-year business and preservation plan for the estate. This plan must demonstrate financial viability, historical integrity, and ecological responsibility. This plan must be reviewed and approved by a board consisting of myself, a historical preservationist, and an independent forensic financial advisor." My mother gasped. "A board? You are making them apply for their own inheritance?" "Eleanor wanted to ensure the house survived," Calder said simply. "She did not want a landlord. She wanted a CEO." He turned a page. "Furthermore, there is a strict preservation covenant attached to the property. Regardless of who takes over, no major structural changes can be made to the exterior, and absolutely no removal of any flora listed on the Maple Bridge Heritage Tree Registry, including the white oak known as the Sentinel, without the unanimous written consent of the board." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The Sentinel. She had protected it in ink. "This is ridiculous," my father sputtered. "They are children. Cassidy is an accountant, sure, but she is single, and Chloe, well, Chloe is an artist." "I am a creator, Dad," Chloe corrected, finally putting her phone down. Her eyes were darting around, processing the information. I could see the gears turning. She was not thinking about the preservation plan. She was stuck on condition 1. Wait, Chloe said, a slow smile spreading across her face. So, basically, the first one to get married and hand in some paperwork gets the mansion? That is the deal? You need an approved business plan, Chloe, I said quietly. It is not just paperwork. It is a forensic analysis of the revenue streams. Chloe waved her hand at me as if swatting away a fly. Oh, please, Cassidy, you can hire people to write business plans. That is what assistants are for. But the marriage thing? That is the real race. She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with a predatory confidence. She knew I had been with Owen for 5 years, but she also knew we were slow, methodical, and terrified of debt. We had talked about marriage, but always in the abstract future. Chloe, on the other hand, treated romance like a contact sport. I can find a husband, Chloe announced, leaning back in her chair. I have literally 3 guys in my DMs right now who would propose if I let them. Logan has been begging me to make it official for months. Logan? My father asked. The DJ? He is a crypto investor and a musical artist, Chloe said defensively, and he looks great in a tux. That is half the battle. She stood up, energized. The grief, if there ever was any, was gone. She was now in competition mode. Okay, so here's the plan, Chloe said, addressing the room as if she were already in charge. I am going to lock this down. We will plan the wedding here, the wedding of the century. I will get the marriage license. I will pay some nerd to write the boring plan for the board, and boom, Silvercrest is mine. And Mom, Dad, don't worry. Once I'm in charge, I will totally take care of you. My parents looked relieved. They saw a lifeline. They did not understand that Chloe's definition of taking care likely involved putting them in a guest cottage and charging them rent. But for now, they were happy to back the horse that looked fastest. Arthur, my father said, standing up and buttoning his jacket, we will contest this. Of course, it is irregular. You can try, Calder said, closing the binder. But I drafted this trust myself. It is ironclad. If you sue, the legal fees will come out of the estate's liquid assets, effectively freezing the funds you are so desperate to access. I would advise against it. My father deflated again. He knew he was beaten. Fine, he grumbled. Chloe, darling, let's go discuss this strategy. We need to look at dates. They shuffled out of the library, their voices rising in excitement as they moved down the hall, already planning the guest list, already spending the money they did not have. I remained seated. The room was quiet again. I looked at Arthur Calder. He was watching me. He had known me since I was a child. He knew I was the one who balanced the books during my summer breaks. He knew I was the one who sat with Eleanor when she cried over the property taxes. I picked up my pen and wrote 2 words on my notepad. Owen, Tuesday. Calder's eyes flickered down to my notepad, then back up to my face. He did not smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a microscopic breach in his professional facade. The board convenes on the 1st of every month to review submissions, Calder said, his voice dropping to a murmur. The next meeting is in 3 weeks. It would be a shame if the only submission we had to review was a ghost-written fantasy from your sister. It takes time to plan a wedding. Mr. Calder, I said, keeping my voice even. Most people need a year. Most people do, he agreed. He took off his glasses and began to polish them with a silk cloth. But then again, some legal procedures are much faster. A courthouse, for example, opens at 9 in the morning. He held my gaze. It was a challenge. He was telling me that the door was open, but I had to be the one to walk through it. He was telling me that fairness was a myth, and that in a game of legal technicalities, the person who moves quietly often moves fastest. I will see you soon, Arthur, I said. I hope so, Cassidy, he replied, for the sake of the trees. I stood up and walked out of the library. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. Chloe was going to plan a pageant. She was going to throw money at florists and caterers and photographers. She was going to make noise. I was going to make a file. As I walked past the hallway mirror, I caught my own reflection. I did not look like a bride. I looked like a CEO who had just survived a hostile takeover attempt, and I realized, with a sudden, cold clarity, that I did not need a white dress. I needed a witness and a stamp. The game was on, and my sister had no idea she was already losing. Back in my one-bedroom apartment in the city, the silence felt heavy. It was a stark contrast to the performative noise of Silvercrest. But for 3 nights in a row, I could not sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the stale air, my mind replaying the scene in the library over and over. I kept thinking about my wedding, not the strategic legal maneuver Grandma Eleanor had outlined, but the one I had actually wanted. Since I was a little girl, I had a very specific picture in my head. I wanted to stand under the sentinel in October. I wanted the leaves to be that burning shade of russet and gold. I wanted a string quartet playing something quiet. I wanted simple wooden chairs and the smell of wood smoke in the air. I wanted it to be about the vows, not the venue. But every time that image floated into my mind, it was violently replaced by Chloe's voice talking about concrete pads and laser shows. On the 4th morning, Owen found me sitting at the kitchen island, staring into a black coffee. He sat down opposite me. He did not touch his breakfast. "You are hesitating," he said. It was not a question. "It feels cold," I admitted, tracing the rim of the mug. "Running off to a courthouse to secure an asset, it feels like something my father would do." Owen reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was firm. "Cassidy, look at me. This is not about the money. We do not need their money. We are fine. This is about the house. And more importantly, it is about that tree." He paused, letting the reality sink in. "Do you want to wake up in 6 months and realize that the place where your grandmother taught you to read is now a parking lot for a DJ booth? Do you want to see the Sentinel turned into firewood because you were too polite to interrupt Chloe's main character moment?" I looked at him. I thought about the safety net my mother had promised Chloe. I thought about the absolute lack of respect they had for the land. "I have spent my whole life stepping aside for her," I whispered. "Every birthday, every graduation. I always made myself smaller so she could have the room." "Stop shrinking," Owen said. "Put on your shoes. We are going downtown." City Hall was the antithesis of romance. It was a gray government building that smelled of floor wax and stale bureaucracy. We had to wait in line for 45 minutes behind a man paying a parking ticket and a couple who looked like they were arguing about a prenup. When our number was finally called, B14, we walked up to a glass partition where a woman named Brenda was chewing gum with terrifying enthusiasm. "Marriage license?" she asked, not looking up from her computer. "Yes," I said, "and the ceremony? Today, if possible." She typed something, stamped a form, and pointed to a door on the left. "Justice of the peace is free in 10 minutes. Fill this out. Do not use red ink." We sat on a hard plastic bench and filled out the forms. Name, date of birth, social security number. It was administrative. It was dry. It was perfect. There were no flowers. There was no white dress. I was wearing my work blazer and jeans. Owen was in a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. When we stood before the judge, a tired-looking man who clearly wanted his lunch break, it took exactly 6 minutes. We exchanged simple vows. I promised to be his partner. He promised to be mine when he slid the ring back onto my finger, the same ring Chloe had mocked. I felt a surge of emotion that had nothing to do with real estate. I loved this man. He was willing to turn his marriage into a tactical strike to help me save a tree. "By the power vested in me," the judge droned, "I pronounce you husband and wife." We kissed. It was not a movie kiss. It was a seal on a contract, a promise of protection. "Congratulations," the judge said, handing us the paperwork. "Next." We walked out of the building and into the bright, harsh sunlight of the city plaza. We did not go to a fancy lunch. We did not pop champagne. Owen immediately pulled out his phone. He opened a scanning app. He laid the marriage certificate flat on a concrete bench, smoothing out the edges, and snapped a high-resolution PDF. "Done," he said, tapping the screen. "Sent to Arthur Calder via encrypted email. Subject line, Condition 1 met." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a week. Now for part 2. The next morning, we sat in Arthur Calder's conference room. It was far more intimidating than City Hall. Sitting across from us was the board. Arthur, a woman named Dr. Evans, who was a historical preservationist for the state, and a man named Mr. Klein, a forensic auditor who looked like he ate balance sheets for breakfast. I placed my binder on the table. It was 3 inches thick. "This," I said, sliding it forward, "is the 5-year operating strategy for Silvercrest Manor." I did not use buzzwords. I did not talk about vibes. I spoke the language I knew best. "Currently, the estate relies on peak season weddings for 80% of its revenue," I began, opening the binder to the first spreadsheet. "That is a vulnerability. One bad summer, one lawsuit, and the cash flow dries up. My plan diversifies the income." I walked them through the numbers. I proposed a new structure for corporate retreats during the weekdays, utilizing the library and the high-speed fiber optic lines we would install. I laid out a plan for historical tours in the off-season, partnering with the local historical society to offer ticketed walks through the gardens. "And regarding the grounds," Owen added, stepping in. He handed Dr. Evans a separate document. "We have drafted a conservation easement for the waterfront. It designates the root zone of the Sentinel as a protected ecological area. We have budgeted $15,000 annually for an arborist to monitor soil compaction and root health. This is not just about keeping the tree alive, it is about leveraging it as a marketing asset. The guardian of Maplebridge. It becomes a selling point for eco-conscious clients." Mr. Klein flipped through my financial projections. He stopped at page 42, where I had outlined the risk assessment. "You have factored in a recession buffer," Klein noted, looking up, "and a sinking fund for the slate roof repairs." "The roof has 5 years left, realistically," I said. "If we do not start saving $3,000 a month now, we will be insolvent when it leaks." Klein looked at Calder. He closed the binder. "This is professional grade. I usually see this level of detail from commercial developers, not heirs." "Doctor," Evans nodded. "The tree protection plan is excellent. It exceeds the town's requirements." Calder looked at me. His eyes were twinkling. "The board is unanimous," Calder said. "We accept the proposal. Cassidy, you have satisfied the conditions of the trust. We will begin the process of transferring the title and the operating accounts to your control immediately." "How long?" I asked. "Paperwork takes time," Calder said. "Ideally, 2 weeks to finalize the deed transfer and update the signatory powers on the bank accounts. Until then, everything remains status quo on the surface." 2 weeks. Chloe's wedding was in 3 weeks. The timing was razor thin. "Does the family know?" I asked. "Not unless you tell them," Calder said. "As trustee, I am only obligated to inform the beneficiaries once the transfer is complete. However, given that your sister is currently ripping up the rose garden, you might want to give them a heads up." I tried. I really did. I went home that night and drafted a carefully worded email to my parents and Chloe. I attached a copy of my marriage certificate. Just the certificate, not the business plan. I wanted to tell them that I was married, that I was entering the running, and that they needed to pause any major construction. I hit send. 2 days passed. Silence. I called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I called my father. Voicemail. Finally, I got a text from a cousin, Sarah, who was essentially Chloe's spy but had a soft spot for me. "Hey, Cass," the text read. "Just a heads up. Chloe told everyone you are having a mental breakdown. She said you sent some fake marriage license to try and ruin her spotlight because you are jealous. Aunt Diane blocked your number so you would not stress the bride. Also, I think Chloe set up a filter on their email server to junk anything coming from your address. They think you are losing it." I stared at the phone. They had blocked me. They had literally filtered out the truth because it was inconvenient to their narrative. Chloe had spun my legal victory into a story about my instability, and my parents had bought it because it was easier than facing reality. They did not get the message, I told Owen, putting the phone down. They think I am bluffing, or crazy. Owen was reading a book on the couch. He didn't look up. Well, he said, turning a page, if they do not want to read the emails, I guess they will have to read the eviction notice from the venue manager, which, in 2 weeks, will be you. I walked to the window. I could see the city lights, but in my mind, I saw the saws coming for the sentinel. Let them sleep, I said softly. They are going to have a very rude awakening. The speed at which my family spiraled into madness was not gradual. It was a nosedive. 3 days after I sent the email that they had blocked, Chloe announced her engagement. It was, of course, a production. She posted a photo of a square-cut diamond the size of a skating rink, captioned with 5 diamond ring emojis and the phrase, "He put a ring on it. The future Mrs. Pierce is ready to build an empire." Enter Logan Pierce. Logan was a 30-year-old DJ turned cryptocurrency evangelist who wore loafers without socks and used words like scalability and synergy in casual conversation. He had a decent following on TikTok, mostly young men who wanted to know how to get rich without working, and he had hair that was gelled to an aerodynamic hardness. I met him exactly once during this whirlwind, at a coffee shop in town where he didn't see me sitting in the corner. I watched him scrolling through photos of Silvercrest on his phone, showing them to a buddy. "Bro, look at the square footage," Logan had said, zooming in on the roofline. "We can turn the carriage house into a recording studio. And the basement? Perfect for a server farm. The electric bill is going to be high. But the passive income? Insane. The girl comes with the house. Man, it is a package deal." He didn't love Chloe. He loved the equity. But my parents were blinded by the glare of the wedding industry. They had convinced themselves that Grandma Eleanor's dying wish was not responsible stewardship, but rather to see Chloe shining like a disco ball in the center of the lawn. Mom would have wanted this. My father told anyone who would listen at the country club. She saved that house for a reason, for the family to celebrate. To fund this celebration, Martin and Diane Williamson began to bleed. I monitored the situation remotely, like a detective watching a bank robbery in progress on a security feed. My father liquidated a substantial portion of his IRA. My mother cashed out a life insurance policy that she had been paying into since the 80s. They were pouring liquid cash into a property they did not legally control, to plan a wedding for a daughter who did not legally own it. The truck started arriving at Silvercrest on a Tuesday. First, it was the interior designers. They were a trendy firm from Boston known for modernizing historic spaces, which usually meant painting everything white and removing anything with character. I watched on Chloe's Instagram stories as they stripped the heavy, velvet drapes from the library, drapes my grandmother had imported from France, and replaced them with gauzy, cheap linen that looked like cheesecloth. They painted over the dark walnut wainscoting in the hallway. They turned the bridal suite, a room of dark wood and historical gravitas, into a bright pink confectionery nightmare that looked like the inside of a gender reveal balloon. Every time a contractor hammered a nail, they were technically vandalizing my property, but I did not stop them, not yet. "Let them increase the basis," Owen said over dinner, watching me grip my fork until my knuckles turned white. "Technically, they are donating capital improvements to the trust. When we take over, we can just repaint. The equity is ours." "They are painting the mahogany." "Owen," I said, my voice trembling. "They are painting 100-year-old wood agreeable gray." But the interior was just the appetizer. The main course was the grounds. Chloe had decided that the existing stone patio was too rustic for her vision. She wanted a continuous flow from the house to the lake, a runway of romance, as she called it. This required knocking out a non-load-bearing wall in the sunroom to open up the dance floor, and more critically, it required lighting. Lots of lighting. She wanted uplighting on every tree. She wanted fairy lights draped like webs. and she wanted a high-voltage lighting rig installed directly around the base of the Sentinel to illuminate the DJ booth she planned to build on top of its roots. This required power, which meant cables, which meant digging. The problem was, to dig anywhere near a heritage tree in Maplebridge, you need a specific permit, you need an impact study, and most importantly, you need the signature of the property owner or the authorized trustee. Since the transfer of power was still in the final administrative limbo at the county clerk's office, the official records still listed the Eleanor Williamson Trust as the owner, but the application required a current living representative to sign off. I checked the town's online permitting portal every morning, waiting for the application to pop up so I could flag it. For a week, nothing appeared. Yet, I could see the excavators parked on the lawn in Chloe's videos. "How are they digging without a permit?" I asked Owen. "The town is strict. They would shut them down in an hour." Owen, who had been scouring the public records database with the obsessive focus of a bloodhound, turned his laptop toward me. "They have a permit," Owen said grimly. "Issued yesterday. Fast-tracked." I stared at the screen. There it was. Permit number 4922 Alpha. Temporary excavation for event lighting installation. "Who signed it?" I asked, leaning in. "Calder wouldn't sign that." Owen zoomed in on the signature line at the bottom of the PDF. There, in loopy, hesitant blue ink, was a signature. Cassidy Williamson. I felt the blood drain from my face. "I did not sign that." "I know," Owen said. "Look at the tail on the Y. You do not loop your Y like that. You end it with a sharp downstroke." I squinted at it. It looked vaguely familiar, but wrong, like someone trying to draw my name from memory. "Wait," I said, realizing where I had seen that specific loop before. I ran to my closet and pulled out a box of old holiday cards. I rifled through them until I found a Christmas card I had sent to the family 3 years ago. I had signed it quickly, with a flourishing loop because I was in a festive mood. I held the card up to the screen. It was a match, a clumsy traced match. "She forged my signature," I whispered. "She traced it from an old Christmas card and forged my name on a government document to dig up the yard." "That is fraud," Owen said, his voice hard. "That is forgery. That is a felony. Cassidy." My first instinct was to call the police, to drive up there with sirens blazing and have her arrested in her bridal pajamas. I reached for my phone, but Owen caught my wrist. "Wait," he said. "Talk to Calder first." We called Arthur Calder on speakerphone. When we told him, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Do not report it yet," Calder said finally. His voice was cold, calculating. "Arthur, she is committing a crime," I argued. "Yes," Calder agreed. "And right now, it is a he said, she said situation. She will claim you gave verbal permission and she just signed for you as a proxy. Families do that. It is messy. It gets thrown out of court." "So I just let her dig?" "You let her start," Calder said. "You let her act on the permit. The moment that excavator bucket hits the dirt, she is liable for environmental damage. And regarding the forgery, we keep that in our back pocket. It is leverage. If we play this right, we do not just stop the wedding. We ensure she can never challenge your trusteeship again without risking jail time. Let her dig the hole. Cassidy, let her dig it deep." It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. For the next 4 days, I became a voyeur of my own destruction. I sat in my apartment, monitors glowing in the dark, watching Chloe's live streams. She was manic. She was running around the property with a hard hat on. Pink, naturally, directing the crew. "Hey guys," she shrieked into the camera on Wednesday. "We are literally transforming this old backyard into a festival ground. Look at those machines. We are burying miles of cable so the sound system will be wireless and sick. Download video. Save to external drive. Folder. Evidence." "My sister is being super quiet," she said in a Q&A session on Thursday, rolling her eyes. "She is just jealous because I am the one taking the initiative. Some people are doers, you know? I am doing this for the family." Download video. Save. On Friday, She posted a reel of Logan standing next to the Sentinel. He was patting the bark. "This big guy is going to look so dope with lasers shooting out of the branches," Logan said, grinning. "We are digging a trench right behind it for the main power line. Nature meets tech, baby." Download video. Save. I was not just saving videos. I was building a forensic accounting of their stupidity. On one screen, I had a spreadsheet open. I was tracking every dollar they mentioned. Custom drapes, $12,000. Excavation crew day rate, $4,000. Lighting rig rental, $18,000. Bridal suite renovation, $25,000. My parents were burning through their golden years at a rate of $10,000 a day. They were spending money on a venue that was about to shut the door in their faces. On the other screen, I had a Word document open. The cursor blinked rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The file name was Settlement Script, Williamson versus Williamson. It was not a wedding speech. It was a list of demands. It was a breakdown of the statutory damages for tree injury. It was a draft of the repayment plan my parents would need to sign if they wanted to avoid bankruptcy. It was midnight on the eve of the rehearsal dinner. The transfer of the trust had officially cleared the county clerk's office at 4 p.m. I had the digital deed in my inbox. I was, legally and irrevocably, the owner of Silvercrest Manor. I watched one last video from Chloe. She was standing on the newly dug earth near the tree, holding a glass of champagne. "Tomorrow is the rehearsal," she cheered. "And next week, the wedding of the century. Nothing can stop us now." I paused the video. Her face was frozen in a rictus of triumph, unaware that the ground beneath her feet was no longer hers. I looked at the forged signature on the permit printout sitting on my desk. I looked at the balance sheet. I looked at the tree law statutes Owen had highlighted in yellow. "Nothing can stop you," I whispered to the frozen image of my sister. "Except me." I closed the laptop. I went to the closet and pulled out the dress I would wear to the rehearsal. It was navy blue. Sharp, professional. It was time to go home. The preparation for the takedown did not feel like planning a family reunion. It felt like planning a heist, but instead of masks and getaway cars, our weapons were PDF files, appraisal algorithms, and municipal statutes. The first step was establishing the value of the hostage. Owen and I hired Dr. Eris Thorne, a consulting arborist who usually testified in high-stakes insurance litigation. We brought him onto the property at dawn, 2 days before the rehearsal, entering through the service road to avoid the excavation crew that was already busy tearing up the south lawn. Dr. Thorne was a man who looked like he was carved out of wood himself. He touched the sentinel with the reverence of a priest handling a relic. He measured the trunk diameter at breast height, 54 inches. He assessed the canopy spread. He took core samples to check for internal decay. He noted the species, the vigor, and the historical placement on the registry. He punched the data into the trunk formula method, the industry standard for appraising amenity trees. "The tree is in perfect health," Dr. Thorne said, tapping his tablet. "Given its size, species, location, and condition, the base value is high. But because it is a registered heritage tree, the replacement cost includes the logistical impossibility of sourcing a specimen of this age. You are looking at a functional value of $95,000. $95,000. That was just for the wood and leaves. Owen, standing next to him with a clipboard, nodded. "Now, apply the New Hampshire timber trespass statute," he said. "RSA 539. If someone willfully cuts, injures, or destroys a tree on land that is not theirs, without the owner's permission." "Treble damages," Dr. Thorne finished. "Triple the value." "Exactly," Owen said, his pen scratching against the paper. "So, if Chloe or her contractors sever more than 20% of the root system, which they will do if they dig that trench for the light show, we are looking at a claim of $285,000, plus legal fees, plus the cost of soil remediation." We had our number. It was a number large enough to bankrupt a small business, or in this case, a wedding budget. Step 2 was securing the enforcement. We drove to the municipal building to meet with the town tree warden, a woman named Mrs. Gable. She was in her late 50s, wore steel-toed boots to the office, and had a reputation for being the most difficult bureaucrat in the county. She hated two things: developers who cut corners, and influencers who treated nature like a prop. When we showed her the photos of the excavation equipment parked 3 feet from the drip line of the Sentinel, her face turned a shade of red that signaled violence. "They are digging inside the critical root zone," Mrs. Gable said, slamming the file shut. "I denied a permit for a deck in that neighborhood last year because it was 5 feet too close to a maple. Who approved this?" "My sister forged the owner's signature on a temporary permit," I said, sliding the evidence across her desk. "But we are not asking you to arrest her for fraud today. We want you to catch them in the act of environmental violation." Mrs. Gable looked at me, then at the photos, then back at me. A grim smile appeared. "I can issue a stop work order," she said. "I can revoke the event permit for the entire property if I find a violation of the tree ordinance. If they cut one root larger than 2 inches in diameter, I shut the power off." "Can you be there tomorrow night?" Owen asked. "During the rehearsal dinner? That is when they plan to test the lights." "I will be there," Mrs. Gable said. "I will bring my calipers, and a police escort if I have to." Step 3 was the financials. This was my solo performance. I went back to my apartment and opened the master spreadsheet. I had categorized every single receipt my parents had bragged about: the custom silk draperies, the repainting of the grand hall, the new furniture for the bridal suite, the deposit for the flower wall. Total sunk cost by Martin and Diane Williamson, $112,000. They believed they were investing in their daughter's future property. In reality, under the law, they were making capital improvements to a property owned by the trust. Without a written agreement stating otherwise, those improvements were considered non-refundable gifts to the landlord. I was the landlord. I opened a new invoice template. I typed the header, Silvercrest Manor, venue rental invoice. I did not offer them the family discount. I offered them the reality of the market. Item 1, exclusive use of Silvercrest Estate, peak season weekend rate, $25,000. Item 2, rush booking fee, less than 6 months' notice, $10,000. Item 3, heritage tree risk insurance premium, mandatory for events utilizing the south lawn, $15,000. Item 4, construction impact fee, $5,000. Item 5, full property buyout. Surcharge, $8,000. I kept adding line items: security, cleaning, liability coverage. By the time I was done, the invoice totaled $63,000. But I wasn't done. I drafted a document titled Use and Indemnity Agreement. It was a simple contract. It stated that the renters, Martin, Diane, and Chloe, acknowledged that all renovations made to the property were permanent fixtures belonging to the trust. It stated that any further damage to the grounds would result in immediate eviction, and most importantly, it stated that the wedding could only proceed if the invoice was paid in full and the preservation covenant was strictly adhered to. I saved the files. I attached them to an email addressed to Arthur Calder. Subject: the evidence package. Body: Arthur. Attached is the arborist's report, the calculated damages under RSA 539, the finalized invoice for the event, and the use agreement. I intend to present these terms to the family tomorrow night. I assume this satisfies the board's requirement for fiscal responsibility? Calder replied 4 minutes later. Cassidy, as trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to maximize the value of the estate and protect its assets. If you believe the current tenants are a liability, you are authorized to act. I just need to know you have the paper to back it up. It appears you have enough paper to build a wall. He did not tell me to stop. That was all the permission I needed. The final piece of the trap was the delivery system. The rehearsal dinner was designed to be a multimedia experience. Chloe had set up a massive projector screen in the grand hall to play a slideshow of her and Logan, mostly photos of them looking expensive in various locations. I knew the AV setup. I knew that the HDMI cable for the projector ran to a laptop on the side table near the window. I created my own slideshow. Slide 1. A high-resolution scan of the trust document, highlighting the two conditions clause. Slide 2. My marriage certificate, dated 2 weeks ago. Slide 3. The official letter from the Board of Trustees approving my management plan and transferring control. Slide 4. The arborist's report on the Sentinel, with the number $285,000 circled in red. I exported the file as a PDF and loaded it onto a plain black USB drive. I tested it on my own laptop 3 times. It had to be flawless. Plug in, click, boom. I drove up to Maple Bridge the evening before the rehearsal. The house was buzzing with activity. Caterers were unloading crates of champagne. Florists were weaving garlands that cost more than my first car. I avoided everyone. I slipped into the side door of the grand hall while the crew was on break. The laptop was there, sitting on the table. I quickly checked the ports. It was compatible. I walked out to the back terrace. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. The air was cooling down, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. I walked over to the Sentinel. It was surrounded by yellow caution tape and orange spray paint, marking where the trenches were supposed to go. The excavators were silent for the night, looking like sleeping predators waiting to feed. I ducked under the tape and placed my hand on the rough bark of the tree. It felt cool and solid. This tree had survived ice storms, hurricanes, and droughts. It had survived the Great Depression. It had outlived my great-grandfather and my grandmother. And now, it was being threatened by a DJ booth. I looked up into the canopy. The leaves were rustling softly, a sound like whispering paper. I thought about the invoice in my bag. I thought about the look on my mother's face when she would realize she had spent her retirement on a house she didn't own. I thought about Chloe, who believed the world was just content waiting to be captured. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and quick. Was I being cruel? Was I ruining a moment that mattered to them? Then I looked down at the orange spray paint on the roots. They were going to cut right through the structural anchors of the tree. They were going to kill it, slowly, over 5 years, just for one night of Instagram photos. The guilt evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I am sorry it has to be this way, I whispered to the tree. But they do not speak our language. They only speak money. I patted the trunk one last time. Tomorrow, I said softly. Either your roots get cut, or their music stops. I am choosing the silence. I turned around and walked back toward the house. The lights were coming on in the windows, golden and warm, hiding the rot inside. I checked my pocket to make sure the USB drive was there. It was small, light, and devastating. I was ready. The echo of Chloe's laughter was still bouncing off the crystal chandelier when I stood up. The room was warm, smelling of roasted lamb and expensive perfume, but the air around my table felt sub-zero. Chloe was still holding her champagne flute aloft, her other hand gesturing grandly toward the window where the Sentinel stood in the darkness. Illuminated by the floodlights she planned to replace with lasers. The guests were clapping. My parents were beaming, their faces flushed with pride, and the 3 glasses of wine they had consumed to celebrate their daughter's hostile takeover of the backyard. And honestly, Chloe was saying, pivoting for her best camera angle, once we clear out that debris, the view of the lake is going to be... Chloe. My voice was not loud, but it had the distinct, cutting quality of a gavel hitting a block of wood. She froze. The smile didn't leave her face immediately. It just stiffened, turning brittle. She blinked, looking over the heads of her influencer friends to find me. Cassidy? She said, her tone dripping with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. Babe, we are in the middle of a toast. Can you save the sisterly speech for the open mic later? I am not making a speech, I said, stepping away from my table. I am making a correction. I looked at Owen. He was already moving. He walked calmly to the side table where the AV technician, a kid named Tyler who looked terrified, was managing the slideshow. Owen didn't ask for permission. He simply reached out, unplugged the HDMI cable from the DJ's laptop, and plugged it into our own machine. The upbeat pop music that had been underscoring Chloe's monologue cut out instantly with a sharp electronic pop. The silence that followed was aggressive. The sudden lack of noise made the room feel smaller, tighter. Every eye shifted from Chloe to the large projection screen behind her. "What are you doing?" my mother hissed, half rising from her seat. "Cassidy, stop this immediately. You are embarrassing your sister." "Actually, Diane," I said, using her first name, which made her recoil as if I had slapped her. "I think I am saving her from a felony charge, but before she cuts down Grandma's tree and uses Grandma's house as a studio, I think everyone here needs to see a few pieces of paper that you all seem to have missed." Owen hit the spacebar. The screen, previously displaying a photo of Chloe and Logan posing on a yacht they didn't own, turned stark white. Then, text appeared. It was a high-contrast scan of the Eleanor Williamson Revocable Living Trust. I had highlighted the relevant section in bright yellow. It was massive on the screen, impossible to ignore. Clause 7. Section B. Transfer of control. The entirety of the Silvercrest estate and its operating assets shall be transferred to the first granddaughter who fulfills the following two conditions. 1. Production of a valid marriage certificate. 2. Submission and approval of a 5-year preservation and business plan by the Board of Trustees. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the older guests, the ones who actually knew how to read legal documents, squinted at the screen. "What is this?" Chloe laughed nervously, glancing back at the screen and then at Logan. "Is this a history lesson? Boring." "Next slide," I said. Owen hit the key. The screen changed. This time, it was a document stamped with the official seal of the city clerk. The date was zoomed in. October 14th. Certificate of marriage. Spouse 1, Cassidy Eleanor Williamson. Spouse 2, Owen Thomas Reed. The room went dead silent. It was the kind of silence you hear in a courtroom right before the sentence is read. I saw Chloe's eyes widen. She looked at the date. She did the math. 2 weeks ago. You got married?" she stammered, the hand holding the champagne glass dropping slightly. "Without telling anyone? At a courthouse?" "I did not need a party, Chloe," I said, walking slowly toward the center of the room. "I needed a contract." "So what?" Logan spoke up, his voice booming unpleasantly in the quiet room. He stood up, adjusting his tuxedo jacket. "So you got hitched. Congrats. That doesn't mean anything. Chloe is the one planning the wedding here. She is the one with the vision." "Next slide," I said, not taking my eyes off Logan. The third image appeared. This was the kill shot. It was a formal letter on the letterhead of Calder, Evans, and Klein, attorneys at law. To Cassidy Williamson, managing trustee. Transfer of title. Silvercrest Manor. Dear Mrs. Reed, we are pleased to inform you that your 5-year preservation plan has been unanimously approved by the board, effective immediately. Full executive control of the Silvercrest estate, its grounds, and its financial accounts is transferred to you. You are now the sole legal administrator of the property. The date on the letter was 3 days ago. The color drained from Chloe's face so fast it looked like a special effect. She looked at the screen, reading the words, "Sole legal administrator," over and over again. The bouquet of white roses she had been holding in her other hand slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft, wet thud. Logan, to his credit, was faster on the uptake. I saw the calculation happen in real time behind his eyes. He looked at the house, the 11 bedrooms, the waterfront view, the asset he thought he was marrying into. Then he looked at Chloe, who was now just a girl in an expensive dress with no deed to her name. Then he looked at me. He sat down. He didn't say a word. He just sat down and took a long drink of his scotch. "This is a lie," my father roared. Martin Williamson stood up, his face purple. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Cassidy, this is a sick prank. You cannot just steal the house. We have put money into this. We have contracts." "You have receipts," I corrected him, my voice steady. You do not have contracts. You have spent $112,000 of your retirement savings on cosmetic renovations to a property you do not own. You did that without a written agreement. In the eyes of the law, Dad, that is considered a gift. Thank you for the new drapes. I hate them. But thanks. You ungrateful little... My mother started to scream, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of financial terror. We did this for the family. For your sister. You did it for the optics, I snapped, losing my cool for the first time. My voice echoed off the high ceiling. You ignored Grandma's wishes. You ignored the trust. You ignored me. You thought because I was quiet, I was stupid. You thought because I didn't care about likes, I didn't care about this land. I took a breath, smoothing the front of my blazer. Tonight, I said, lowering my voice so they had to lean in to hear me. You are hosting a rehearsal dinner in my house. You are drinking wine paid for by my business accounts, which, by the way, I am freezing tomorrow morning. And you are standing on a floor that I now control. Chloe let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. You can't do this. The wedding is in 2 days. People are flying in. The magazine is covering it. The wedding can happen, I said coldly. I am not a monster, but it happens on my terms, and my terms start with that tree. The tree? Chloe shrieked. Who cares about the stupid tree? Before I could answer, the double doors at the back of the hall banged open. The sound was loud enough to make half the guests jump. Standing in the doorway was a woman who looked like she had walked straight out of a battleground. She was wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a gray flannel shirt, cargo pants, and heavy work boots. She held a clipboard in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Behind her stood 2 police officers. It was Mrs. Gable, the town tree warden, and she looked absolutely delighted to be crashing the party. She marched into the room, her boots thudding heavily on the polished floor. She ignored the guests. She ignored the food. She walked straight up to my father and Chloe. Who is the permit holder for the excavation on the south lawn? She barked. My father stammered. Who are you? I am the person who is about to shut this circus down, Mrs. Gable said. She held up a device that looked like a radar gun. I just took readings from the trench your crew dug this afternoon. You have severed 3 feeder roots of a registered heritage tree. You are in violation of Municipal Code 491 regarding critical root zones. She turned to look at Chloe, who was trembling. And, Mrs. Gable added, her voice dropping to a dangerous growl, we need to have a little conversation about the signature on that permit application, because unless your name is Cassidy, someone is going to jail for fraud. The silence that followed was total. Even the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen seemed to stop. I looked at Chloe. She looked trapped. She looked at Logan for help. But Logan was busy studying the label on his whiskey bottle, avoiding eye contact at all costs. Happy wedding weekend, I whispered. I turned to Owen. Shut it down. Owen pulled the plug on the projector. The screen went black, but the damage was done. The lights were on, and there was nowhere left to hide. The silence in the room was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum just before a structure implodes. Mrs. Gable, the town tree warden, did not care about the awkwardness of a family feud. She cared about botany and statutes. She opened her aluminum clipboard with a snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hall. She laid 3 photographs on the white tablecloth, right next to the untouched appetizers. This is Exhibit A, she said, her voice flat and professional. The first photo showed the Sentinel from 10 years ago, lush and thriving. The second showed the registration certificate from the Heritage Tree Registry, stamped with the town seal. The third photo was taken 3 hours ago. It showed the jagged, raw trench that Chloe's crew had cut into the earth, severing a root as thick as a human thigh. Under New Hampshire Revised Statute Annotated. Chapter 2. 172. This white oak is a protected entity, Mrs. Gable stated. She looked at my father, then at Chloe. You have excavated within the critical root zone. You have severed structural roots. In simple terms, you have destabilized a tree that weighs 40 tons. If that tree falls on this house during a storm, it is no longer an act of God. It is negligence. Owen stepped forward. He did not look like my husband in that moment. He looked like the environmental attorney who had crushed corporations for dumping chemicals in wetlands. "Let us talk about the cost," Owen said. He pulled a sheet of paper from his pocket. "We have a certified appraisal from Dr. Thorne. The replacement value of a century-old white oak is $95,000. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. "For a tree? That is insane." "It is biology," Owen corrected her. "But here's the problem. Diane, under the timber trespass laws, because this damage was willful, meaning you did it on purpose to install a light show, Cassidy, as the owner, is entitled to treble damages." He paused to let the words sink in. "Treble means triple," Owen explained. 3 times $95,000 is $285,000. Add in the legal fees, the soil remediation costs, and the fines from the town, and you are looking at a bill of over $350,000. Chloe made a noise that sounded like a dying bird, but, she stammered, "But we can just plant a new one. If it dies, I will buy a new tree, a better one." Mrs. Gable laughed. It was a dry, bark-like sound. "You cannot buy time. Miss," the warden said, "you cannot go to a nursery and buy 100 years of growth. The law protects the history, not just the wood. And let me be clear. If you touch that tree again, I will not just fine you, I will revoke the certificate of occupancy for this venue. No permit, no wedding." The threat hung in the air. No wedding. I stepped forward. I placed my leather clutch on the table and unzipped it. I pulled out a single document. It was printed on thick, high-quality paper. It was an invoice. I slid it across the table toward my father. "This is the bill for the venue rental," I said calmly. My father looked at it. His eyes bulged. $138,000? He sputtered. "Are you out of your mind? We are your parents." "I am the managing trustee," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "I am required by the trust to charge fair market value. You booked the estate with less than 6 months' notice. That is a rush fee. You are using the entire grounds. That is a buyout fee. You are engaging in high-risk activity near a heritage asset. That is an insurance surcharge, and you are doing it on a peak October weekend. This is the price." I leaned on the table, looking him in the eye. "You spent $112,000 renovating a house you do not own. Dad, you gave me free drapes. You gave me a new floor. I appreciate that, but that does not pay the rent." Chloe looked like she was going to be sick. Logan was staring at the invoice as if it were a contagious disease. "However," I said, straightening up, "I am not a monster. I am a businesswoman, and I am willing to offer a family discount." I pulled a second document from the folder. It was the use agreement. "If you sign this," I said, "I will lower the fee to $30,000. $30,000? My mother asked, hope flickering in her eyes. $30,000, payable tonight, I confirmed, but there are conditions. I pointed to the clauses in the agreement. Condition 1. You acknowledge that every renovation you have made is a permanent, non-refundable gift to the trust. You will not ask for a penny back. Condition 2. You agree that the Sentinel is off limits. No lights, no digging, no DJ booth. If anyone steps inside the caution tape, the event is over immediately. Condition 3. You acknowledge that I am the owner of Silvercrest, and any future access to this property is at my sole discretion. It was a surrender treaty. I was asking them to pay me for the privilege of giving me a renovated mansion. Chloe looked at Logan. Her eyes were desperate. She needed him to fix this. She needed her knight in shining armor to throw down a credit card and tell me to go to hell. Logan leaned in close to her ear. He thought he was being discreet. He thought the ambient noise of the room would cover him. "Babe, just sign it," Logan whispered, his voice low and nasty. "It is just a tree. We will pay the $30,000, have the wedding. And then I will come back next month with a chainsaw and cut the damn thing down at night. They can't prove it was us." The room was quiet. We all heard it. But the person who heard it most clearly was Mrs. Gable. The warden did not blink. She pulled a small black notebook from her vest pocket. She clicked her pen. Subject expressed intent to commit willful malicious destruction of property post-adjudication. Mrs. Gable said aloud as she wrote, reciting the words as they hit the page. Note added to file. She looked up at Logan. "If that tree develops so much as a fungal infection in the next 5 years, young man, I will have the police at your door before you can trade your next crypto coin. You are now the primary suspect in a crime that hasn't even happened yet. Congratulations." Logan turned pale. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. I walked around the table until I was standing right between my mother and Chloe. I lowered my voice so only the family could hear. I did not want the guests to hear this part. This was the blade I had been keeping in my sheath. "I know about the permit, Chloe," I whispered. She stiffened. "I know you traced my signature from the Christmas card," I continued. "And Mom, I know you set up the email filter to block my notifications. I know you intercepted the certified letter from the lawyers." My mother looked down at her hands. "That is mail fraud," I said, "and that is forgery. I have the documents. I have the handwriting analysis. I could hand them to Mrs. Gable right now. She has 2 police officers waiting in the hall." Chloe let out a small, terrified sob. "But I do not want to arrest my sister on her wedding weekend," I said softly. "I just want my house back, and I want my tree safe." I slid the use agreement closer to my father. I placed a pen on top of it. $30,000, Dad, or I let the warden do her job. Martin Williamson looked at me. For the first time in his life, he did not see his boring, accountant daughter. He saw the woman Eleanor had chosen. He saw the person who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. He looked around the room. He saw the guests watching, confused but sensing the tension. He saw the lavish decorations he had paid for. He saw the new curtains he had bought for my windows. He realized, with a crushing weight, that he had been played. He had spent 6 months upgrading my asset, and now he had to pay me to use it. He was trapped between his pride and his wallet. If he walked away, the wedding was canceled, the money was wasted, and the scandal would destroy them. If he signed, he kept his dignity, but lost his power. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the tip tapped against the paper. Tap, tap, tap. He signed the agreement. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his checkbook. He wrote the date. He wrote my name, Cassidy Williamson Reed. He wrote the amount, $30,000 and 0 cents. And then he paused at the memo line. "Venue fee," I prompted him. He gritted his teeth. He wrote it, "Venue fee, Silvercrest Manor." He tore the check out with a ripping sound that felt like a final punctuation mark. He handed it to me. He did not look me in the eye. "Thank you," I said. I picked up the check. I picked up the agreement. I turned to Mrs. Gable. "They have agreed to the terms. Warden, the tree is safe." Mrs. Gable looked at the signed paper. She nodded. "I will be watching," she said to Logan. "I will be parked across the street all weekend." She turned and marched out, the police officers following her. I looked at Chloe. She was crying, ruining her professional makeup. She wasn't crying because she was happy. She was crying because for the first time in her life, she had lost. I checked the time. "You have 48 hours. I said to her, "Enjoy your party, but stay away from the roots." I took Owen's arm. We walked out of the grand hall, leaving the music dead and the check burning a hole in my pocket. The silence behind us was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. I was not at Silvercrest Manor. I was sitting in a small, unassuming coffee shop 40 miles south, in a town where nobody knew my last name. I sat at a scratched wooden table near the back, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Across from me, Owen was reading a newspaper, but he wasn't really reading. He was turning the same page back and forth, his eyes flicking to his phone every 30 seconds. We were refugees from our own victory. Technically, we could have been there. As the owners, we had every right to sit on the front porch and watch the spectacle unfold. But I did not want to see it. I did not want to see my sister wearing a dress that cost $15,000, pretending that she hadn't tried to defraud the government to pay for it. I did not want to see my parents smiling that tight, desperate smile of people who had just written a check for $30,000 to their own daughter. Instead, I had a spy. My cousin Sarah, the only member of the extended family who thought tree law was fascinating rather than petty, was sending me live updates via encrypted text. Photo received. I opened it. It was a wide shot of the south lawn. The venue looked spectacular. I had to admit, my parents' money had been spent effectively. The white marquee tent was gleaming. The floral arches were massive, and the gold Chiavari chairs were lined up in perfect rows. But the caption read, "The vibe is funeral chic. Everyone is whispering. Chloe looks like she has been crying for 3 days." I zoomed in on the next photo. It was a candid shot of the bride and groom. Chloe was stunning in silk and lace, but her eyes were puffy, and her smile looked like it had been glued on by a makeup artist. Beside her, Logan was scanning the crowd. He did not look like a man in love. He looked like a man who had bought a stock at its peak and was watching it crash in real time. He looked bored. He looked trapped. Text from Sarah. "The DJ just tried to test the bass. It shook the windows." Aunt Diane looked terrified. I checked the time. It was 4 in the afternoon. The ceremony was over. The reception was starting. This was the danger zone. "Do you think they will try it?" I asked Owen. He put the paper down. "It is Chloe," he said. "She thinks rules are suggestions, and she thinks Mrs. Gable was bluffing." At Silvercrest, the sun was beginning to set. The golden hour that Chloe lived for was approaching. This was the moment she had planned the entire event around. This was when the lights were supposed to turn on. According to Sarah's next text, the trouble started with a vibe check. The DJ, a friend of Logan's named DJ Cryptic, decided that the designated stage area, the concrete patio we had agreed upon, was too far from the action. He wanted the booth closer to the tree. He wanted the aesthetic of the branches over his head. And the lighting crew, paid extra by Logan under the table, decided that the caution tape around the sentinel was ugly. Text from Sarah. "They just cut the yellow tape. They are dragging the speakers onto the root zone. They are wrapping LED cables around the trunk again. They are saying it is just for the first dance visuals." I felt a spike of adrenaline. "They breached the perimeter," I told Owen. "They cut the tape." Owen didn't flinch. "Wait for it." At Silvercrest, the music was building. The bass was thumping, vibrating through the ground, shaking the very roots we were trying to protect. Chloe and Logan were stepping onto the grass, ready for their grand entrance as a married couple. The lights flickered on, casting a purple and green glow against the ancient bark of the oak tree. It was exactly the picture Chloe wanted, for about 3 minutes. Then, the real guest of honor arrived. Sarah didn't send a text this time. She sent a video. The camera was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. Through the thumping beat of electronic dance music, a siren wailed, not a police siren, but a megaphone siren. The music cut out abruptly. The silence that followed was jarring. Into the frame walked Mrs. Gable. She was not alone. She was flanked by 2 officers from the building department and a uniformed police officer. She walked straight past the stunned guests, stepping over the severed yellow tape like a general crossing a battlefield. She walked up to the DJ booth, which was now sitting squarely on top of the critical root zone. "Power down," she ordered. Her voice was not amplified, but it carried across the lawn. "Now." "Yo, we are in the middle of a set," the DJ yelled back. Confused? "You are operating unpermitted electrical equipment within a protected ecological zone in direct violation of the Use Agreement and Municipal Code 491. Mrs. Gable announced. She turned to the police officer. "Officer, Please disconnect the power source for the outdoor audio system. This event is in violation of its conditional permit. The officer nodded and walked toward the generator truck. No! Chloe screamed. She ran across the lawn, her heels sinking into the soft earth. You cannot do this. It is my wedding. It is a crime scene, Mrs. Gable replied without looking at her. I warned you. One toe over the line. You moved 1,000 pounds of equipment over the line. The officer pulled the main breaker on the generator. The purple lights died. The hum of the speakers vanished. The fairy lights in the trees went dark. Silvercrest Manor was plunged into the gray twilight of a New England evening. The only sound was the wind in the leaves of the sentinel and the frantic breathing of my sister. Fix it! Chloe shrieked at Logan. Do something! Pay them! Logan stood there, his hands in his pockets. He looked at the unlit tree. He looked at the grim-faced warden. He looked at his new wife, who was unraveling in front of 200 guests. I can't fix it. Chloe, Logan said, his voice loud enough for the front row to hear. You said you owned the place. You said you handled the permits. This is on you. It is Cassidy, Chloe screamed, spinning around, looking for a ghost. She pointed a finger at the empty house. She did this. She is ruining it. She is jealous. But I wasn't there, and the guests knew I wasn't there. They looked at the girl in the white dress screaming at a darkened building, and they saw exactly what she was. A child throwing a tantrum because she had been told no for the first time in her life. The guests started to move. It was a slow, awkward shuffle at first. Then, someone whispered, "Is the bar still open?" And the crowd began to drift toward the house, away from the dark, silent lawn. The festival wedding was over. It was now just a quiet dinner in a room with bad lighting. Back in the coffee shop, my phone buzzed against the wooden table. It was a text from an unknown number. I knew immediately who it was. I picked it up. Tree is safe. Music died instead. Gable. I stared at the screen. The words blurred for a second. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, but it came out as a sob. I covered my mouth, tears pricking my eyes. It wasn't a malicious laugh. It was the sound of a weight being lifted, a burden I had carried since I was old enough to understand that my sister's happiness was always going to cost me something. It is over, I whispered to Owen. He squeezed my hand. It is over. We finished our coffee in silence. It was the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted. The fallout was swift and quiet. 2 weeks later, I sat in the library of Silvercrest, my library, across from a representative of Heritage Venues, a professional management firm that specialized in historic properties. I signed a contract that handed over the day-to-day operations to them. They would market the manor for what it was, a retreat for history lovers and quiet luxury, not a party palace for influencers. The income would be steady. The tree would be protected by professional arborists. The business would be sustainable. My relationship with my family was less sustainable. My parents retreated to their condo in Florida. They sent stiff, formal emails about the weather, never mentioning the check they had written or the wedding that had ended in silence. Chloe and Logan's marriage lasted exactly 4 months, about as long as it took for Logan to realize that the real estate empire he had married was actually a strict trust fund controlled by the sister-in-law he had insulted. They divorced quietly, citing irreconcilable differences regarding lifestyle compatibility. Chloe stopped posting about Silvercrest. She pivoted to van life content, pretending she had always hated big houses anyway. But I didn't care about their content anymore. I walked out onto the south lawn. It was late afternoon in November. The air was crisp and smelled of coming snow. The trench had been filled in, the soil aerated and treated, the grass was healing. I stood under the sentinel. There were no lights. There were no speakers. There were no screaming brides or anxious parents. There was just the sound of the wind moving through the remaining copper leaves, a dry, rasping song that had been playing for 100 years. I placed my hand on the trunk. For years, I thought Grandma Eleanor had left me a burden. I thought she had left me a fight I couldn't win. But standing there, in the quiet that I had fought for, I realized she had left me a mirror. She knew I was the boring one. She knew I was the invisible one. But she also knew that oaks do not grow tall by screaming for attention. They grow tall by holding their ground. The test wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the money. It was about seeing if I had the courage to kill the music of manipulation, of guilt, of keeping the peace at my own expense, so I could finally hear myself think. I looked up at the branches spreading against the gray sky. "I hear you, Grandma," I whispered. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a symphony. Thank you so much for listening to Cassidy's story. If you enjoyed this tale of petty revenge and tree law justice, please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how the family handled the aftermath. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share more satisfying stories with you.